A guy in a basement in Cincinnati just beat Vegas. Not once. Not twice. He's done it 73% of the time over 4 years, and the sportsbooks have quietly banned him from 3 platforms. His name isn't important. What he built absolutely is. Because what this man created isn't intuition. It isn't luck. It's a machine. And it's rewriting the rules of fantasy sports forever. Here's the thing nobody in the sports betting world wants to admit: the gap between a casual player and an elite analyst isn't talent. It isn't time. It's data architecture. And by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why most fantasy players are bringing a calculator to a supercomputer fight. Let me show you what playing God in sports actually looks like. Picture this. It's a Thursday night in October 2022. DraftKings has priced Derrick Henry at a modest fantasy value. The public loves him, injury history scares the sharps, consensus puts his projected rushing yards at 68. But one analytics firm in Austin, Texas, called Rotoviz, had already run a proprietary model factoring in defensive alignment data, historical weather patterns for the stadium that night, Henry's snap count trends, and something called DVOA. Defense-adjusted value over average. A metric so granular it measures not just how well a defense performs, but how well it performs against specific player archetypes. Their model projected 112 yards. Henry ran for 114. That isn't luck. That's science. And it's just the surface. To understand how we got here, you have to rewind to 2003. A book called Moneyball didn't just change baseball. It cracked the entire sports world open like an egg. Billy Beane and the Oakland A's proved. With a $44 million payroll against teams spending 3 times that hidden value existed in data nobody was looking at. On-base percentage. Defensive metrics. Player clustering. The nerds weren't just right. They were devastatingly right. And the fantasy sports industry paid attention. By 2010, the first wave of analytics-forward fantasy platforms began emerging. ESPN introduced projections engines. Yahoo integrated advanced stats. But the real revolution didn't come from the platforms. It came from the basements. Individual analysts started building their own models, pulling raw data from sources like Pro Football Reference, Sports Reference, Next Gen Stats, and the newly opened NFL Tracking API. They layered in machine learning, regression models, neural networks trained on 10 years of play-by-play data. The results were staggering. And this is where it gets dark. Because while the hobbyists were gaining an edge, the professional operators were building weapons. Fantasy sports became a $9.4 billion industry by 2023. Daily fantasy sports platforms like DraftKings and FanDuel weren't just games anymore. They were financial markets with injury reports as insider information. And a small group of professionals, some estimates put it at under 400 people nationwide, were capturing an estimated 91% of the winnings in large field tournaments. 91%. That number should stop you cold. This is the brutal math that the industry doesn't advertise. It's the same dynamic as poker: the rake destroys the average player, while the elite few print money. But how? How does a predictive model actually work at the elite level? Let me break it down into 3 layers. Layer 1 is data ingestion. The best models aren't just pulling box scores. They're scraping PFF grades, Pro Football Focus grades, which manually chart every single player on every single play. They're ingesting air yards data, which measures not where a receiver caught the ball, but how far downfield the throw was targeted. They're pulling Vegas line movement in real time, because sharp money moving a line from -3.5 to -5.5 in 2 hours tells you something the public doesn't know yet. Layer 2 is feature engineering. This is where the magic happens and where most hobbyists fall apart. Raw data is noise. Useful data is signal. Elite analysts build what are called derived features, mathematical combinations of existing data that reveal hidden patterns. Target share percentage weighted by air yards. Red zone opportunity rate adjusted for defensive coverage scheme. Receiving back usage rate, a metric that specifically isolates pass-catching running backs against linebacker coverage, historically one of the most exploitable mismatches in football. These aren't metrics you'll find on ESPN. You have to build them. Layer 3 is model validation. Any analyst can build a model that predicts last year's data perfectly. That's called overfitting, and it's a trap. The professionals use something called walk-forward validation. They train their model on years 1 through 3, test it on year 4, retrain on years 1 through 4, test on year 5, and so on. If the model degrades under new conditions, it's garbage. The models that survive this process are the ones you should be terrified of. And here's the twist nobody sees coming. The biggest edge in 2024 isn't machine learning. It's injury data. Specifically, it's soft tissue injury tracking. The kind buried in practice reports, beat reporter tweets, and post-game press conference body language analysis. An ACL tear ends a season. But a hamstring strain that reduces a running back's burst by 12%? That doesn't show up in the injury report. It shows up in his split times, his yards after contact, his route depth. One firm, Sharp Football Analysis, built an entire module specifically to detect hidden performance degradation using only publicly available snap count data and yards after contact metrics. In the 2023 season, they flagged 7 players showing signs of undisclosed soft tissue issues before the mainstream injury reports confirmed anything. 7 out of 7 were accurate. That's not analysis anymore. That's surveillance. But here's what all of this misses. And this is the part that surprised even me when I dug into the research. The models break. Catastrophically. Sometimes. Patrick Mahomes missed a game in 2022 that no model predicted because of a freak ankle roll in warm-ups, 30 minutes before kickoff. Josh Allen's 2023 elbow issue emerged mid-game in a way that zero pre-game data could have anticipated. The best analysts in the world will tell you the same thing: variance is king in a single game. The edge only materializes across a large sample. The casual player loses because they're playing for 1-week glory. The professional is playing a 200-week math problem. That's not just philosophy. It's the central mathematical truth of sports prediction. In 2019, researchers at MIT published a study analyzing 800,000 fantasy sports decisions and found that skill, genuine, measurable skill, was detectable in fantasy sports outcomes, but only in players making more than 150 lineup decisions per season. Below 150 decisions, variance overwhelmed skill completely. You literally cannot tell the difference between a great analyst and a lucky amateur under that threshold. The professionals know this. That's why they enter hundreds of contests per week. They're not gambling. They're running a distributed statistical experiment at scale. So where does this leave you?